In our first tale, you find yourself in the perfect spot for a cold January night. Your home, inside where it's warm. It would take a lot for you to venture outside in that weather. Except you hear it. Just like the man in this tale, shared with us by author Jim Horlock. He hears a sound from outside, and he ventures out into the mucky fields to find out what it is. Performing this tale are David Alt, Ash Millman, and Andy Cresswell. So dress appropriately and mind your footing out there when you discover what the mud gave.
I heard crying in the lower field, and it chilled my blood to ice. I wanted to believe it was some lost kid run away from the village, hiding from heartbreak or parents or the pressures of school. I knew it wasn't. That terrible wail couldn't be anything other than a baby. I had no brothers or sisters, and thus avoided nieces and nephews. I'd never wanted kids, but I knew that sound all the same. Except it was wrong. All wrong. And in the lower field of all places, what did it mean? Despite the thickness of my coat, the terrible cold of dread crept up my spine. A part of me wanted to turn away, to go home and forget it. It was a trick of the mind, I'd tell myself later, a stray gust of wind or the call of a sick bird. The lower field was in fallow. I'd left it that way for years and never went there. There was no crop nor herd to worry about, no reason to check. The wail came again, and I found myself walking. My grip was tight on my shovel. I couldn't ignore it. Who could? The way down was steep and wet. I'd walked this path since I was a child, but I still slipped despite my caution. In panic, my flailing hand gripped the barbed wire, and I hissed as it drew blood. It welled up in the creases of my palm, a river flooding valleys. I curled my lip. My father had built the damn fence, gone for more than 10 years, and he was still managing to make me bleed. For a moment, I pictured his face, the dark and furious eyes and the hard, heavy brow. The face of the monster. He'd scold me for hurting myself on the fence and miss the irony of hurting me more in punishment.
You reap what you sow, boy.
I remembered how I'd last seen him, broken and pleading, that proud nose flattened, those eyes filled with fear. This land was mine now, not his. The mud belonged to me. Before those red memories could take hold, I heard the wailing again, closer now, urgent. The anger was gone in an instant, ripped away by fear. There was not a doubt in my mind that there was something unnatural about it. I found the babe half-caked in mud, naked and pale. Its eyes were closed, and there was no movement from its chest. How had it come to be here? There was no one around, no tracks. As I struggled to fathom the situation, it let out another chilling cry from those cold blue lips. I fell back. Had I gone mad? This couldn't be. I squeezed my wounded hand in a tight fist, blood welling between my fingers. The pain was real. This was no dream. Standing once more, I crept closer, drawn in by the horror of the moment. The likeness was uncanny, but I guessed all babies looked roughly the same. This couldn't be him. I'd buried him myself years ago. But this was Joshua. I'd never felt a paternal instinct, but in that moment I felt the opposite: revulsion, dread, and utter loathing. This creature was a threat to all I was. As it cried again, I lifted my shovel with a primal scream. I wasn't sure how I got back to the farmhouse. I must have walked, but I don't remember doing it. The miserable rain had burned off in the sun, and I had no idea of time. The front door was open. I stumbled in, cold and numb. The shovel was heavy in my hands. Muddy footsteps led into the kitchen. Lorna was there in all her ruin, still wearing the clothes she'd been buried in. She'd looked neater then. Standing up, her broken neck left her head hanging at an angle. Her feet were bare and muddy. I thought I should tell her that she was dead, but I was sure she knew. Her eyes were sad and empty. "I buried Joshua," I told her.
"Yes."
Her voice crawled up out of her crushed throat like some skittering insect. I could see the rope marks on her pale skin.
"In the lower field."
I frowned. That was right, wasn't it? I struggled to grasp the order of events. But that was years ago.
"Does it matter? You're all muddy.
I slipped.
You're caked in it, through and through. It's in your blood, in your heart. It's all you care about, this damn land."
"That's not true." My voice thundered and made me wince. That room had heard too many raised voices over time. My father's and then my own. They were all the louder for it. Silence reigned a while after that.
"Your parents are outside."
It couldn't be. The monster and his enabler died years ago. They stood out in the yard anyway, naked, pale shapes in the pounding sunlight. Mud caked them both. My father's face was dark with dried blood still. There'd been no funeral for him, no coroner to tidy up his body. I'd buried them in the lower field. Even the police hadn't asked too many questions. Everyone knew what he was. I alternated between fear and rage as I looked at them, standing motionless, staring at the house. This wasn't right. This wasn't fair. I'd rid myself of them both. This was my land now. Whatever the fertile mud gave up was mine. Fury won out, and I stormed out there, shovel in hand. I'd done it in the barn the first time. I'd struck my father when his back was turned and hadn't stopped. My mother ran in to find out why I was screaming. When she tried to stop me, I did her too. She was just as much to blame as him. It was their fault. This time, neither of them screamed. They just stared at me as I did it. I buried them in the lower field, beside the babe that couldn't be Joshua but was. I didn't ask why they'd come back or why they weren't rotted. They weren't ghosts. They were made of cold flesh. When I split their skulls, mud was what came out. I asked no questions at all. I put them back in the ground while the sun beat down on me. The lower field could have them, and it would be left to rot with them just as it had been when I first put them there. When it was done, I was sweating hard and panting heavy. I wanted nothing more than to go home and sleep. Lorna's muddy footprints left the house and went to the barn. I'd always wondered why she'd chosen to do it there. Sweet Lorna, lovely Lorna. I'd loved her as hard as a broken thing like me could love. Hadn't been enough. I didn't look in as I passed. I knew I'd see her swinging if I did, right over the spot where I'd killed them years before. I hadn't put her in the lower field. That was a place for all that was wrong in my life. Instead, she'd been buried in the garden, an act that meant I could never find peace there again. I didn't even open the curtains on that side of the house in case I caught sight of the spot and it reminded me what I was. They were open as I passed through to the bedroom. I forced myself not to look. It should have been dark, but the sun wouldn't set. I slept anyway until Lorna woke me.
"Where's Joshua?"
She stood at the foot of the bed, neck still bent, eyes still empty. "I'm sorry, I buried him in the lower field."
"That's what you said, but you were never sorry. You never wanted children."
"You were never supposed to get pregnant. You knew I couldn't have kids, not with what I am, not with what he made me into." I got up and left the room, but she pursued me.
"The lower field is where you left our son. buried with all the other people you hated, the other people you murdered.
I turned all fury and struck her across the face. It was like punching wet soil. Mud trickled from her mouth. She grinned at me, and her teeth were brown with it.
Your parents are outside.
For the first time, her eyes weren't empty. They were bright with cruelty. I ran to the window and saw she was right. They were in the yard just as before. As I stormed out to meet them, taking up my shovel, my father spoke.
You reap what you sow, boy. And you sowed death right into the mud.
It's mine! I pulled back to swing.
You're right, it's all yours.
His head tumbled and mud oozed from his neck. Joshua was crying again when I dragged their bodies to the field. When I came back, Lorna was back in the barn. I slept and I woke and I did it all again. What I buried, the mud gave back. The sun never set and the past wouldn't stay dead. I'd killed the monster but couldn't escape him because I'd become him. I'd killed anything that threatened to ruin me. I killed them again and again under the light of the undead sun, and the mud gave them back every time. When my strength finally gave out, when my spirit broke and I could no longer lift the shovel, they came for me. I didn't fight them as they took me to the barn, carried in their muddy hands. Why? I asked Lorna. I never killed you. I never put you in the mud.
You did. Second you killed our baby.
They placed the shotgun in my hands.
Do it. We bury you in the lower field, and the mud will give you back, just like us.
My jaw quaked and my vision swam. Somehow I knew I'd been here before.
Just like every time before.
I raised a shaking hand to my head. Half my skull was missing. I brought my fingers back down to check them. They were coated in mud. I nodded, crying, took up the shotgun, and pulled the trigger.
Clear, frosty January nights are the perfect time to do some stargazing. But something else is up there, and we realize it isn't a plane, but it is falling quickly to Earth. And in this tale, shared with us by author Manon Lysette, we meet two residents of a nearby town who witness the crash. And when they finally realize what's happened, it's too late for their lives to ever remain the same. Performing this tale are Lindsay Russo and Atticus Jackson. So look up, look way up. You might see something and proclaim, "It fell with the night."
We saw it moments before we heard the booming sound, like lightning before thunder. The massive shape in the sky commanded our attention when it appeared suddenly, as though out of nowhere, plummeting towards the earth in a directionless fall. In the dimming light of dusk, it was hard to make out what it was. At first, I thought it was a plane, but as it grew closer, I realized it couldn't be. Planes don't have legs. Planes don't blot out the sky. Planes don't twitch as they fall. Perspective dictates the closer the object, the bigger it gets. That held true at first, with the thing seeming to take over every inch from zenith to horizon. I remember feeling like a child under a playground parachute, but rather than delight as the fabric fell towards me, I felt nothing but dread at the thought of being crushed under it like an ant. Thankfully for us, as it descended, the shape shrank. To what size exactly, I couldn't really tell. If it had to be a hand, it was now a finger. If it had been a metropolis, it was now a town. Within minutes, the central part of its body impacted the ground, shooting out a scorching wind in all directions. By the time it reached Jackson and I, the gust had cooled enough that it only felt like opening an oven door. Others closer to the impact site weren't so lucky. Later, I would see the burn scars, which spoke for themselves. Then, there were those who were never found at all, presumed incinerated or crushed during the incident. The legs, I couldn't count how many, fell in turn. Their landing was more graceful, punctuated only by the creak of trees buckling under their weight. They stuck out over the forest canopy, bent at sharp angles, capped by joints, with each segment spanning at least a football field in length, if not longer. From our vantage point up on the hill, sitting in Jackson's trunk bed, where we'd been waiting for nightfall to watch the yearly meteor showers, we couldn't see it in detail. The fallen thing was a silhouette that had permanently changed our once familiar horizon.
What the hell was that?
Jackson was the first to speak, asking a question I'd normally meet with a smart-ass reply. For once, I was too stunned to say anything. Don't get me wrong, I'm normally good in a pinch. A few months ago, a pipe burst in my dorm and my roommate just stood there while I ran to close the water valve. Some people jump into action immediately. Others need a moment to gather their thoughts. I'm the former, but I don't think any less of the latter. I'd want a surgeon to be able to react quickly if their patient suddenly started bleeding out, and I'd want an architect to thoroughly mull over the numbers to make sure they use the correct support beams in their structures. This was so outside the realm of the natural that I needed to process what I was seeing. Counterproductively, my body was screaming at me to act, using up valuable brain resources needed to figure out what I was looking at and how I should feel about it. I had no point of reference, no roadmap to follow. My whole world had suddenly been shrouded in the unknown. The space station? I heard my voice as though someone else had borrowed it. The world came back into focus, and I realized I'd replied without even thinking about it. In hindsight, I probably said that because it was the only big thing that could fall from the sky, even though it obviously wasn't the ISS for the same reasons it wasn't a plane. In a large radius around the impact site, the trees were bowing, seemingly locked in their bent positions, while the ones farther away were whipping back and forth as they recovered from the scorching gale. I reasoned that if they were still swaying, then I must not have frozen for as long as it felt like I had. Jackson stared bug-eyed at the forest.
What is that?
I don't know.
You saw that, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't in my head?
No. Our phones went off almost in unison. Jackson's mom, my dad. Both checking to see if we were okay. Both knowing we were near the forest and terrified it, whatever it was, could have fallen on us. We reassured them and, like a relay race, as soon as we hung up, the phones rang again. Jackson's sister, my mom. Mom wanted to know if us kids were okay. Didn't matter how old we got or that I'd been away for college for a year, but we'd always been kids in our parents' eyes. We went through another round of reassuring one another we were fine and vice versa. I had 3 voicemails by the time I hung up. Jackson had a few as well. Everyone and their poodle was calling one another, some quoting the accident, others the earthquake, and even the gas explosion. I don't know if they hadn't seen the creature or if they were in the same state of disbelief as Jackson and I were. Either way, there was no mention of the crater-sized elephant in the room. I was halfway through reassuring my Auntie Erica that I was okay when the creature's legs twitched, making me realize, to my horror, that it, whatever it was still very much alive. Simultaneously, the call dropped and the lights in town went off from closest to farthest, as though hit by a wave of pure darkness. Jackson, who'd been facing me, pulled his phone away from his ear and looked at it quizzically. He was about to ask when I gestured behind him. Power outage, I said. though it felt more malicious and intentional than the banal words used to describe it. Jackson's face turned a sickly white I'd only ever seen on corpses on TV.
Rose!
Rose was his sister. She'd been his second or third call during our phone marathon. She's okay, right?
She's home alone.
But she's okay.
I think so. Yeah. No, yeah, she's fine. She was a bit shaken up, but...
He hopped out of the truck bed, gesturing for me to follow.
She's home. Alone. We gotta get back.
I lifted my hands in surrender. Okay. Rose was 13, not so young that she couldn't be left alone, but young enough that he was understandably freaking out about leaving her in the middle of what may very well have been a world-ending event, for all we knew. He'd already started the truck by the time my feet hit solid ground. I became less aware of what I was doing, as though I'd engaged autopilot. Before I knew it, we were well into a 3-point turn to get back onto the single road down the mountain. High beams on, eyes scanning the forest, the gravel road, and the sky in a continuous loop. He was driving at a slow crawl, even though I could tell he wanted to race back. His hands were white-knuckling the steering wheel. His chest wasn't moving. Breathe, Jackson. It's gonna be okay.
I am breathing.
Well, you're not breathing enough. He threw his arms in the air in frustration.
What the hell does that even mean? Get out of here with your not breathing enough. I'm breathing, okay? The hell are you? The breathing police?
He clutched the steering wheel again, his angry expression melting back into fear. He glanced at me from the corner of his eyes in an apologetic manner.
She's gonna be all right. Right?
I placed a hand on his shoulder. You said it yourself. She's at home. She's safe. She's probably a little scared, but it's okay to be scared.
Are you?
Bro, I nearly shat my pants back there. Of course I am.
Don't you dare shit yourself in my baby. I just said the interior's cleaned.
I shoved him playfully. We laughed. He swept the sky by gaze again, tension returning to his fingers. He let out another chuckle, though this one sounded much less genuine.
Man, we're gonna feel so stupid if this turns out to be a weather balloon.
And just like that, we broached the topic we'd been skirting around. I felt my chest tighten. To talk about it was to acknowledge it was real. There was no going back. I almost wished we'd had a few more minutes of pretending. It's not a weather balloon.
I know.
You think it's just us?
Just us?
Just here, I mean. I couldn't help but picture hundreds, maybe thousands of these creatures falling all over the planet in quick succession. A coordinated attack. It knocked out the power, our cell signals. For all we know, the rest of the world's already dead. I suddenly felt very small, like on a cosmic level. Jackson was quiet for a long, uninterrupted moment, mulling it over.
I guess. Or maybe it's like The Loneliest Whale.
That a children's book or something?
No, it's
He furrowed his brows.
Well, I don't remember all the details, but there's like this whale in the ocean, right?
Yeah, that's where most whales live.
Har har, real funny.
He scratched the back of his head.
This one's special. It has like a deeper voice or whatever. Or a higher pitched voice. I forget exactly. They think it might be the last of its species because it doesn't sound like any other whale. And it's always alone. Wandering aimlessly in search of a friend or family or anyone that could understand it. Maybe it doesn't know it's hopeless. Maybe it watched as all the others of its kind fell away into the abyss, leaving him behind.
Jackson tended to rant when he was nervous. Well, that's depressing. Jackson smiled, but it was hollow.
What if that's what happened to our weather balloon? Maybe it was gliding through outer space when it saw one little blue planet full of life, and it came here not to attack, but to get to know us. Or for us to get to know it.
I'd never known Jackson to be the sentimental type. The way he talked about loneliness, I couldn't help but feel he wasn't just talking about whales and aliens. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. In hindsight, that was probably the wrong thing to do. The truck's lights landed on what I thought was an uprooted tree up ahead that was blocking the road. It went diagonally across, leaving a gap that might have been okay if we'd been on ATVs or bikes, but was far too small for the truck to fit through.
Shit. Must have got knocked down.
He didn't need to specify that he meant knocked down by the shockwave following the crash. The forest floor was littered with broken branches and fallen leaves. There was no doubt more than a few trees, even farther away like we were, had broken. There was only one problem with Jackson's theory. The impact site was to the east, and the elevated portion of the tree was also facing east. If it had been broken by the shockwave, shouldn't it be facing west, away from the epicenter? Jackson? I think I knew before I understood all the implications. I think a part of me had seen the bigger picture as we were driving up to the so-called tree, but the conscious part of me was lagging. I pointed to the shape and found that my hand was shaking. I couldn't even tell you how long it had been doing that. It's not a tree. He leaned forward in his seat. I watched him rather than it as his eyes trailed up to the treetops and then higher still. Fear dawned on his face anew. It was like we were on a merry-go-round, but instead of slowing to a stop, every turn kept going faster, never giving us a second to breathe. There was barely anything to hold on to as reality strobed around us, stripping away our peaceful evening like old flecks of paint. A leg. It was one of its legs, and it was blocking the way. We need to go around it. Maybe if we went very slowly and quietly, he wouldn't notice us. Jackson shook his head.
Can't. Tree line's too dense.
He was right. His truck didn't have much hope of weaving through the forest, even if we tucked his mirrors in. There had to be something we could do, because I knew what the alternative was, and I didn't fancy doing it. I knew he'd make us walk. There was no keeping Jackson from getting back to Rose. And while a hike wouldn't kill me under normal circumstances, it was dark and a giant alien creature had just crash-landed in the forest. I think I can be forgiven for wanting to remain in the relative safety of his truck. Then I remembered. What about the old logging road that leads to Murphy's Creek? Turn us around. It can't be too far back. It would be a bit of a detour, sure, but it was better than the alternative. Jackson looked at me with a pitying look. What? He gestured ahead.
We haven't passed it yet. It's a bit farther down.
Shit! The gears in Jackson's head looked like they were turning. I had a pretty good idea what he was about to suggest.
What if we...
Absolutely not.
Try to move it?
Okay, that wasn't what I was expecting. So he didn't want us walking. He wanted us to do something even more unhinged. You can't be serious. Look at the size of that thing.
I'm not talking about crashing the truck into it. What if we just, I don't know, do something?
Do something? What a great plan, Jackson. Brilliant.
Shut up.
No, I mean it. Step 1, do. Step 2, something. It's great. I mean it.
Okay, Miss College Educated. You can cut the sarcasm, I get it. You think I'm stupid.
What? No, come on, I never said that. I rubbed circles into my temples. Look, we're both stressed. We need to take a second and a few nice, big breaths.
And we're back at being the breathing police. God, you're insufferable sometimes.
He unbuckled and opened the door, leaving the keys in the ignition and the truck running. Wait, where are you going?
Where do you think I'm going?
He made a very broad and sharp gesture towards the leg. A gesture that screamed, duh.
I'm gonna check it out.
His tone still held resentment, but his next sentence had an underlying current of apprehension to it.
You coming?
It felt like a stranger's hands were wringing my stomach, like someone was standing right behind me, their breath on the nape of my neck. My head and shoulders floated, my bottom half was cement. I didn't want to get any closer. I wanted to scream, hell no! But somehow, I unbuckled myself and stepped out of the truck with him. It was like an out-of-body experience. I wasn't fully in control of myself. And let me be clear, I'm not saying I was being possessed by the creature or anything like that. It's just that we humans have an incredible ability to just carry on, especially in extreme situations. It's our survival instinct. It's how mountaineers crawl back to camp on frostbitten limbs, or how some stabbing victims stay conscious up to and not a moment longer than when help arrives. Fight, flight, freeze. Those are all temporary conditions. Once they fade away, you either go back to being you, or another you takes over for a bit. The other me followed Jackson much, much closer to the entity than I was comfortable going. I'm surprised to admit that, as we got closer, some of my fear was replaced with curiosity. Illuminated by the truck's headlights, I could see a veiny tapestry of sagging skin hanging from something rigid within. Think a towel on a towel rack. The surface, whose color I can't even begin to describe, was full of deep ridges and folds in all directions, a bit like pruny fingers. In hindsight, I think the creature had deflated. I think that's why it appeared so large from a distance and smaller as it fell to the earth. Whatever its insides were made of had been expelled, leaving behind a month-old birthday balloon you can't bring yourself to throw away because there's still a bit of air left.
Ah!
Jackson stumbled back. My heart stalled. What? I looked where he was looking, but I couldn't see anything abnormal. Well, the entire situation was abnormal, but within the context of abnormality, nothing seemed weird-er. That is, until I caught movement in my periphery. For a moment, part of the skin changed. A clump of sagginess tightened towards a central point, and for an even shorter amount of time, the collection of skin hardened into what I can best compare to a bug's exoskeleton. It turned a deep, mirror-like black, then released and sagged anew. Then it happened again to another collection of skin cells nearby. I guess I'll call it a shell, because that's kind of what it was. It kept glitching on and off in quick succession, almost as though the creature was trying and failing to transform. Jackson was transfixed by the show.
It's like chromatophores.
Huh?
Like how squids change colors. They got sacks of color under the skin, like thousands of them. And when they open them, boom, instant color change.
Well, this thing looks like it's getting harder.
Same principle, different animal.
Slowly, some of the clumps started staying in their shell form for longer. I couldn't tell you if this was a good thing or not. Jackson picked up a stick, which instantly made me think of a kid prodding a jellyfish. Tell me you're not gonna poke it. He smiled.
Fine. I won't tell you.
The next time his shell formed near him, he gave it a tentative poke. The reaction was instantaneous. From deeper within the forest, the creature groaned. I didn't so much hear it as I felt its voice. It's like the static you feel hovering your fingers over an old TV screen, or when your arm falls asleep and prickles as it wakes up, only much more intense. I could feel it inside my skin. I could feel it in my bones. Hell, I could feel my bones, period. Which was a sensation much more unsettling than you can imagine when hearing it recounted. do you know how many bones you have? Imagine suddenly being aware of each and every one of them. Imagine being able to feel their exact shape inside of you because they're all vibrating like a doorstop. Or maybe it was everything else vibrating against them. Whichever it wasn't a pleasant sensation. It was dizzying, nauseating, terrifying, and I almost lost it when Jackson poked it again. Stop that! He frowned.
Sorry, I thought maybe it'd move.
I shoved him again, and this time, there was nothing playful about it. Seriously? And do what, squash us like a bug?
I just want to get home to Rose.
Well, don't piss off the giant alien creature and we might make it.
Fine.
He rolled his eyes and threw his arms back in surrender. But as he did so, the stick poked into the sagging skin, creating a small tear that sputtered some sort of blood equivalent. I jumped away, as did Jackson, but a few drops of the liquid landed on him. The smell was utterly indescribable. It was as foreign to me as if the sky turned a color outside the gamut of human sight. My olfactory receptors were somehow able to pick up the scent, but were unable to compare it to anything I'd ever smelled before or since. I couldn't even tell you whether it smelled good or bad. It was that foreign, that unadapted to my nose. Sometimes when you smell something potent, you can kind of taste it too. That wasn't the case with this. There was only the smell. Through it all, I could feel the creature bellowing once more, shaking me to my literal core. Jackson was screaming, swatting at the liquid in panic. But after a moment or so, both he and the creature calmed down. He looked at me, red in the face.
I thought it was gonna be acid.
Does it hurt?
Nope.
All right, well, I was going to tell him he should probably clean himself quickly just in case, but I was interrupted by something that drew my eyes above. What's that? We both looked up at the sky where translucent shapes were floating gently towards us. They were hard to make out individually, but visible due to their sheer number. Where they overlapped, their outlines were denser, like layering two pieces of frosted glass. They were cone-like with a trio of antennae on the shorter end and at least 30, probably more, tentacles of various widths and lengths on the other. The tentacles were spread out, dancing overhead almost like falling snowflakes. The central parts of their bodies were about a foot in length, with their tentacles, or tails, or whatever you want to call them, adding to each several more feet. Some were shorter, some were longer, some fatter, some skinnier.
Polyps.
The tentacled creatures landed on the leg, which bucked hard enough that it threw Jackson and I on the ground. I missed a few instances of what happened next, but my best guess is that some of them wove their way into the colossal body through the cut in its flesh. I turned back to see the skin around the area turn to its shell-like consistency, but by then, it was too late. There were thousands of the little creatures landing along the leg, and I assumed up to its central body and other branching limbs. The creature emitted wave upon wave of static-like screams, which had me pointlessly cover my ears and tuck my head between my legs. I could feel Jackson next to me, also roiling in agony and likely a fair amount of confusion. I'm not sure how long we spent on the ground being vibrated from the inside out, but it was long enough I practically forgot what it felt like to be normal. Even to this day, when I try to sleep, sometimes I feel it. Just like one might feel ocean waves after a long day at the beach. Eventually it ceased. I took a few minutes to collect myself and let my body adjust to the silence. By the time I unfurled, swaths of the giant creature were missing. The appendages I'd mistook for antennae on the smaller critters had latched onto the skin and were sucking in the organic matter, filling themselves with it. It gave them color, where previously they'd been nearly transparent. I was vaguely conscious that I was seeing the food filling their alien bodies.
Go on, get!
I scanned the area by gaze and found Jackson backing away, swatting at some of the creatures homing in on him. They weren't circling me the same way they were circling him. Hell, they didn't even seem to care I was there. Why Jackson? My blood ran cold. The creature's blood. They must have been drawn to the smell or taste or whatever it was the creature had left on Jackson. Their three-pronged mouths swooped in and tried to latch on, but he quickly slapped them away. He couldn't keep it up. There were too many of them. I already had a plan. Already knew what needed to be done. Since we didn't have time to wash the blood off Jackson, the next best thing was to bury the scent, to soil the taste. While Jackson screamed for help, I hopped into the truck bed where there was a canister of gasoline. It wouldn't be pleasant, I knew that much. But while the fumes might kill smaller creatures, Jackson would probably be okay as long as we kept him away from matches or any sort of spark. It was a risk we had to take. Gasoline in hand, I turned around. A few years ago, I was working at a convenience store near a construction site. It was broad daylight, so not exactly a scary time of day, though I was working alone that shift. A man wearing a bright orange vest walked through the door. His eyes were wide with fear, but somehow also vacant. He shambled towards me, pointing at something on the shelf. I'm not sure what. Maybe it was the first aid kit bolted to the wall. Maybe it was the newspapers. Whatever it was, he seemed completely oblivious to the pole running all the way through his head. The first responder told me, and I remember her words very clearly, that he was dead. He just didn't know it yet. There was nothing that could be done to save him. As I turned to face Jackson, I saw that same vacant expression of petrification and confusion on his face. I saw something moving under the surface of his skin. I was in denial as I ran over and covered him in gasoline, as though my plan still had a chance to work. A few of those things fell off, but it was too late. Jackson let out a weird groan as his body jerked upright and one of the critters burrowed out from the top of his head. I remember thinking I wish I hadn't run for the gasoline because the last thing he saw was me running away from him. Whether he knew I was coming back or not, I'll never know. But it hurts to think he might have thought I was abandoning him. I wish I'd run to him, swatting the creatures away in vain, so that at least I would have been by his side. The result would have been the same. He was dead the moment that blood hit his skin. But I could have brought him comfort. And I didn't. And I have to live with that. The critters circled back around to him, gasoline or not. I spent at least an hour trying to fend them off, screaming at them that they couldn't have him. All I did was draw out the process. I got him. Every last piece. Stolen from me little bite by little bite. By the time he was gone, there was almost nothing left of the colossal creature either. By dawn, every trace of it and the tentacled things were gone, leaving nothing but a scar on the landscape. Today, we subscribe to a polite fiction about what happened that night. It was a meteor strike. The forest shows all the signs of one, and there's no evidence to the contrary. Jackson is considered one of the casualties. Telling his father was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. I don't even know if Rose knows the truth. That's the thing. Since we all pretend it didn't happen the way it did, I don't actually know how many people know what really fell from the sky. With some, it's obvious that they saw. I can tell by the way they're always scanning the sky or flinching when a bird flies overhead. With others, well, they either hide it very well or they genuinely don't know. As for me, I know what I saw. And while I'll never have all the answers, I have a pretty good theory thanks to Jackson. I think he was right to compare it to sea life. I don't think it was an attack. I think it was just some sort of cosmic entity reaching the end of its life cycle and ending up in shallow waters, just like marine life from the depths do when they're weak and dying. It was probably warped and deformed by Earth's pressure and atmosphere. Who knows what it was supposed to look like? Who knows how many of them are out there now, unbeknownst to us? As for those jellyfish-like things, I think they were simply bottom feeders, probably sensing the creature's end was near. They'd probably followed it, waiting for a quick meal. In some small, strange way, thinking this makes me feel a little bit better about everything. It was nature. That's all. But then I think of Jackson, and all I want to do is cry.
In our final tale, we join a couple on their way to one of the most legendary and life-affirming experiences anyone can have, attending a music festival. They're young, they're living life in the fast lane, and their car's broken down. And in this tale, shared with us by author K.G. Lewis, a forced detour leads to an eerie metropolis where music and mayhem go hand in hand. Performing this tale are Atticus Jackson, Sarah Thomas, and Peter Lewis. So there's a warning sign on the road ahead, but pay no attention. Just power on and, of course, keep on rockin' in the free world.
Shit. I cursed as the car's engine suddenly died. I tried to restart it, but it wouldn't respond. I couldn't even get the lights or radio to turn on. Nothing seemed to be working. Not wanting to leave the car in the middle of the road, I turned the wheel and let it coast to a stop on the shoulder. Elena opened her eyes and stretched in the passenger seat.
What's going on? Why'd you stop?
Car's dead. I pointed at the dashboard. Elena sat up and looked around, trying to get an idea of where we were. When she didn't see any street signs or buildings, she pulled out her phone and tried to open her map app.
No service.
She turned the screen so I could see it before putting the phone away.
Do you have any idea where we are?
No clue. I was following that shortcut that guy at the gas station told us about. All I know is that this road is supposed to reconnect with the interstate at some point. I had asked the gas station attendant about an alternate route around the city when I saw that an accident had closed all the lanes of the interstate, potentially adding hours to our drive.
What's the last town we drove through?
Some place called Wrong Way, about 20 miles back.
Wrong way? Seriously?
That's what the sign said.
Does your phone have service?
I lifted the phone to check. Nope. I haven't had any service since we left Wrong Way. Elena turned in her seat and looked back at the way we had come, scanning the road behind us.
Have you seen any other cars?
Not since...
Wrong way. I guess that means we're walking.
Five minutes later, Elena and I were standing next to the car, adjusting our backpacks. We'd packed light because we were only supposed to be gone for a couple of days. I sighed as we started walking away from the car. Looks like we're not going to make it to the music festival in time to see the opening acts.
That's fine with me. All of the bands I'm most excited about seeing aren't playing until tomorrow anyway.
We continued talking about the music festival until I realized we'd walked a couple of miles and hadn't seen a single car or house or any other sign of people in the area. Maybe we should turn around, I suggested, wondering if it would have been smarter to walk back to Wrong Way instead of going forward.
This road leads to the interstate, right? If it does, we're bound to run into someone eventually, don't you think?
I guess.
We can go back if you want.
I could tell she didn't want to do that. She figured the next town had to be a lot closer than returning to the previous one. No, we can keep walking this way.
I'm sure we'll come across a house or a gas station soon. Certainly within the next mile or two.
We walked the next mile in silence before I spotted something in the distance. What's that? I pointed across an expanse of tall grass where the top of a white dome was peeking above the tree line. Elena, who was walking a couple of steps in front of me, stopped and turned so she could see what I was pointing at.
It looks like the top of a water tower.
She smiled.
I told you the next town had to be nearby.
She left the road and started to cross the field, motioning for me to follow her.
Come on.
Where are you going?
I'm taking a shortcut.
Shouldn't we just follow the road?
We could,
She stopped and turned around.
but this way will be faster.
How do you know that?
Because of the water tower. The closer we get to it, the closer to town we should be.
When I didn't make a move to join her, she continued.
We can keep walking along the road if you want, but it'll probably take us twice as long to get there, assuming the road doesn't bypass the town altogether.
I hadn't thought of that. I didn't like the idea of walking any further than I had to, and I certainly didn't want to risk walking past the town. I pulled out my phone and checked it, something I'd done frequently as we walked. When I saw that it still had no service, I slid it back into my pocket and walked out into the field to join Elena.
Almost there.
Elena stopped to finish the last drop of water from the plastic bottle she was carrying. When she was done, she put the empty container into her backpack. The walk to get to the water tower was a bit more arduous than it looked. Once we passed through the field and made it into the trees, the ground began to rise and fall in a series of rolling hills. What I thought was going to be a quick walk ended up being an hour-long hike. I pulled out my own water bottle to take a drink.
Do you want to take a break?
Nah, I'm good. The tower was about 500 feet away from us at the top of the next hill. I recapped my water bottle and slid it into the little pouch on the side of my backpack. We could take a break when we get to the top. We were halfway up the hill when Elena suddenly stopped and tilted her head, listening to something.
Do you hear that?
I stopped so I could listen too. When she'd asked, all I could hear was the sound of my footsteps crunching through the tall grass covering the hill. It sounds like music. There was the faint pounding of drums. As I continued to listen, I could make out the whine of an electric guitar and the screaming vocals of a heavy metal singer. Yeah, that's definitely music. Elena smiled as she started walking again.
I know this song.
I don't recognize it. I followed behind her. It didn't sound like anything Elena or I normally listen to.
It's Rainbow in the Dark by Dio. It was one of my dad's favorite songs. There's no sign of the morning coming. You've been left on your own like a rainbow in the dark.
We'd reached the top of the hill where a cracked and rutted road led to the left and right of our position. I pointed to the left. I think it's coming from down there. As we stood there, Rainbow in the Dark ended and a new song began. Elena smiled again.
Whoever's playing this stuff really loves their 80s metal.
I didn't know you were a fan. In the 8 months I'd known Elena, I'd always assumed our taste in music was the same. It was the topic we bonded over, especially our love for the Lumineers and other modern folk bands. We were actually on our way to a folk music festival when the car broke down. I didn't think liking heavy metal was a bad thing. I was just surprised to hear that Elena liked it.
I grew up on this stuff. My mom and dad were huge metalheads in the 80s.
She laughed as she recalled some of the pictures she'd seen of her parents.
You should have seen their hair.
She held her hands up to both sides of her head.
So much hairspray.
As Elena talked, I pulled out my phone, checking to see if the service had returned.
Anything?
I shook my head. Nope.
I guess that means we should find whoever's blasting that music and see if they have a phone we can use.
In my mind, I pictured a bar full of burly bikers, sitting around drinking beer and listening to loud music. That made me uncomfortable with the idea of seeking out the source of the music, but we didn't really have any other options at the moment. As I followed Elena up the road, I silently hoped that we'd find someone else to help us before we found out where the music was coming from. Elena, who had started singing along to Judas Priest's "You've Got Another Thing Coming," didn't seem to share my concerns.
I think I see a house.
We'd been walking for about 10 minutes, following the music, when Elena saw the roof of a structure behind a line of trees a few hundred meters from the road.
Never mind.
She sighed as she came to the other side of the tree line and saw the broken windows and missing door of the house. I pointed at another one on the opposite side of the road in a similar state of disrepair. This one's abandoned too.
Sounds like the music is coming from both houses.
Elena stopped and looked from one house to the other while tilting her head to listen. I stopped and listened too. The music did sound like it was coming from both houses, but it also sounded like it was still coming from further up the street.
Want to check it out?
I asked, nodding toward the nearest house.
Sure.
The music coming from the abandoned houses had piqued her curiosity. She followed me through the weed-infested yard and up onto the porch. The closer we got to the house, the louder the music got.
It sounds like it's coming from the back.
I stepped off the porch and began circling the house, peering through the broken windows. Elena followed behind me.
What are you doing?
Making sure there's nobody inside.
Somebody had to have set up the speakers that were playing the music, and I wanted to make sure they weren't still around. Plus, I'd started to feel a presence, like someone was watching me.
See anything?
No, I can't tell where the music is coming from either.
Well, let's find out.
Elena stepped into the back patio, through the remains of the sliding glass door, and into the house. I turned in a circle, scanning the surrounding area behind the house, trying to figure out why I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. When I didn't see anyone, I joined Elena.
It sounds like it's coming from up there.
Elena had to raise her voice to be heard over the music as she pointed at the ceiling.
In the attic!
This doesn't feel right. I think we should leave.
Elena looked over at me and then back up at the ceiling.
It is pretty weird.
The two of us left the house. When we returned to the road, I started walking back the way we had come, while Elena went in the opposite direction.
Where are you going?
I looked over my shoulder at her.
Back to the car.
Seriously? We're already here. Let's just keep going until we find someone who can help us.
Okay, but if we don't find anyone in the next half hour, we're going back to the car.
Fair enough.
We continued walking up the road without talking to each other. Even if we had anything to say, the increasing volume of the music would have made it hard for us to hear each other clearly. As we walked, I kept my phone in my hand so I could periodically check for service and to see how much time had passed. If we didn't find anyone soon, I was planning on walking back to the car, with or without Elena.
Look!
I glanced up from my phone to see her standing at an intersection, pointing at a building down the street.
I bet whoever is playing the music is in there!
The building Elena was pointing at was a small brick structure with remnants of a large antenna tower on the roof. Mounted on the side of the building facing us were 4 large, heavily weathered letters identifying the structure as a radio station. KLLD. Never heard of it. I had to practically yell to be heard over the music, which seemed to be coming from all of the buildings that lined the street.
I don't think many people have. I doubt they can broadcast very far with a broken antenna.
Do you really think there's someone inside? I don't see any cars. The fact that we'd seen so many abandoned houses but not a single person was making me feel anxious. I didn't want to go any further. I wanted to turn around and leave.
There has to be someone. The music isn't playing itself.
Maybe it's automated, programmed to play random songs.
Even if it is, there should still be someone around to make sure it's running properly.
Not if they've left town like everyone else seems to have. I swept my arm behind me to gesture at the row of empty houses we'd just walked past.
Well, I guess there's only one way to find out.
When we made it to the entrance of the radio station, Elena reached out and tested the glass door to see if it would open.
It's unlocked.
I pressed my face to the dirty glass so I could see inside.
See anyone?
No. All I saw was a reception desk with 2 large speakers sitting on opposite ends of it. Currently blaring from them was the Quiet Riot song, Come On Feel the Noise. But I didn't know that at the time. Elena pulled the door open and walked inside, holding it open for me to follow. As I walked by her, she threw up her hand, making the sign of the devil, and began singing the chorus to the song, while banging her head to the beat.
I love Quiet Riot.
I couldn't tell, I replied with a lopsided grin on my face. The 2 of us stood in the entryway examining our surroundings.
Which way?
2 doors led further into the building, one on either side of the reception area. Why don't you check that door, and I'll check this one.
Sounds like a plan.
Elena turned and approached the door closest to her. I waited until she opened it and peeked inside before I opened my door. On the other side of the door, I saw the booth where the DJ sat and played music. When I noticed that someone was sitting inside the booth with a pair of headphones on, I quickly shut the door and spun around to get Elena.
What'd you see?
I considered lying and telling her that there wasn't anything there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. There's a guy in there.
Well, let's go talk to him.
Elena brushed past me as she rushed across the entryway and through the door. I stood in the doorway and watched as she approached the window of the booth and knocked on it, trying to get the man's attention. It took her several tries, knocking louder and louder each time, before the man, who was sitting with his back to us, swiveled in his chair and saw her. Elena waved at him. The man, who appeared to be in his late 50s or early 60s, was clearly shocked to see us. He stared at us for what seemed like an eternity before removing his headphones, slowly rising from his chair and walking out of the booth.
How did you get here?
Elena looked back at me before answering.
Our car broke down on the way to the interstate. We saw the water tower from the road and figured there was a town nearby, so we cut across the woods and headed this way. From there, we just followed the music until we found you.
She paused for a moment, When the man didn't say anything, she went on.
We're just looking for a phone so we can call someone to come help us.
I walked over to join them as Elena spoke. The man opened his mouth to say something but stopped and looked back at the booth instead because the Quiet Riot song had just ended.
1 second.
He raised his index finger and rushed back into the booth, removed the Quiet Riot record from the player, grabbed the new record without looking at it, and started to play it. A moment later, the guitar intro for Metallica's For Whom the Bell Tolls roared from the speakers. When the man returned, he shuffled over to the desk in the corner of the room, grabbed something, and returned to where Elena and I were standing.
You said you came into town over by the water tower, right?
He unfolded the thing he'd grabbed from the desk and held it up, showing us that it was a map. Elena and I both nodded.
Can you show me the route you took to get here?
Sure, I said, wondering why that was so important to the guy.
This is where we are.
The man pointed to a spot near the center of town.
And this is where the water tower is.
He slid his finger to a spot outside of town. And this is the way we came, I said, stepping forward and placing my finger on the spot where the water tower was and moving it diagonally to the edge of the map. The map didn't show enough of the surrounding areas to have the road where we'd broken down on it.
Did you follow this road to get into town?
The man pointed at the road that ran in front of the water tower.
Or did you cut through here?
He moved his finger in a straight line from the tower to the radio station, cutting across a couple of fields and side streets. We followed the road. Why does that matter? I was getting irritated at being questioned. I just wanted to use the phone and get the heck out of there. The man ignored my question.
Do you know how to use a record player?
He looked from me to Elena. I was sure I could figure it out, but I wasn't going to offer. No.
Of course.
The man motioned for Elena to follow him into the booth. Once inside, he pointed at the record player.
When that song ends, start another one.
He moved his finger from the player to the crates of records that were stacked up against the wall. Elena walked over to one of the crates and lifted a record out.
You only have singles.
She held up a small record that was only large enough to contain a single song per side. The man swept his arms across the room.
What you see is what I got.
Elena put the record back and started flipping through the crate until she found a record that caught her eye. It was Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime. She pulled it out and turned around to show me, smiling.
I'd completely forgotten this band existed. I'm playing this next.
Play whatever you like. Just keep it playing.
He jabbed his finger at the record player. Why? Once again, he ignored my question.
I need to run over to my trailer to get my phone so you can make your call. I'll explain everything when I get back.
He shuffled out of the booth and toward the exit of the radio station. What's wrong with that phone? I followed the man, pointing at an old phone sitting on one of the desks.
Oh, it doesn't work. None of them do. Now, if you want to make a call here, you need a satellite phone, which I have in my trailer.
I was about to suggest that maybe I should go with the man, but Elena interrupted me.
Leave him alone. He's just trying to help.
She turned to the man.
Do you have anything to drink around here? My throat is killing me.
The long hike into town and then having to constantly shout over the music was taking its toll on both of us.
There's a fridge in the break room.
The man pointed to the other side of the building.
Help yourself to whatever you want.
Cool.
Right after she finished speaking, the Metallica song ended.
That's my cue.
She smiled, returning to the booth to put the Queensryche record on. The man waited until the song began to play before he left. I stopped him as he was about to step out into the parking lot.
Wait a minute. Where's your trailer?
You see that stop sign?
The man gestured up the street.
Yeah?
Take that left, and it's 2 blocks up on the right-hand side. You can't miss it.
When he was done talking, he pushed the door open and walked outside. I considered following behind him to see if he was really going to his trailer, but I decided against doing that. I didn't want to leave Elena alone.
Do you want something to drink?
Elena came up behind me, startling me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
When I didn't acknowledge her comment, she put her hand on my shoulder.
Are you okay?
Not really. This place gives me the creeps. Where is everyone? And what's up with all of this?
I gestured at the speakers on the desk.
None of it makes any sense.
You're right, it doesn't. But we're here, so let's try not to make a big deal out of it. When he comes back, we'll call a tow truck and get the heck out of here. Okay?
Okay. Whew. If he comes back.
I thought.
In the meantime, let's see what he has to drink.
Elena tugged on my arm, pulling me toward the door that led to the break room.
What do you want?
Elena stood before the open door of the refrigerator and gestured at the various brands of beer and soda that filled the shelves. I pointed at a bottle of IBC root beer.
Ooh, I haven't had one of those in a while.
Sounds good to me.
She grabbed a couple of bottles and held one out to me, then reached into the fridge and grabbed 2 more before shutting it.
Let's get back before the song ends. I need to figure out what I'm going to play next.
She seemed to enjoy the idea of being a disc jockey. As we made our way back to the booth, I stopped by the front doors and chugged my root beer, looking outside.
I don't think he's coming back.
Why do you think that?
Just a feeling.
You can go look for him if it'll make you feel better.
And leave you here.
I'll be fine.
Are you sure?
Positive. Now go. The sooner you make that phone call, the sooner we can get the hell out of here.
I pulled my phone out and checked it for the millionth time, hoping it would have service, and I wouldn't have to go looking for this man. But that wasn't the case.
Okay, I'm going.
I pushed my way through the door and walked out into the parking lot, as Elena returned to the booth to start looking for the next song she was going to play.
Two blocks up, on the right-hand side.
I muttered to myself after I'd reached the stop sign. I stood there for a moment, looking in the direction the man had indicated, but I couldn't see a trailer. Just a row of shops. Wanting to give the man the benefit of the doubt, I decided to walk up the road to see if I could find the trailer. I did find it. On the other side of an auto body shop, set back a couple 100 feet from the road on a heavily wooded lot. And I didn't like what I found. The door to the trailer was wide open, and there was no sign of the man.
I knew it!
I hissed after I'd poked my head through the doorway of the trailer, confirming that it was empty. As I looked around the interior of the trailer, I noticed feminine items scattered around. Items that most men wouldn't have a need for. and they all looked like they'd been recently used. There's someone else here, I thought. I whirled around and scanned the road, looking for any sign of the man or the woman who was likely with him. But the road curved out of sight, limiting my field of vision. I couldn't have gotten far. I was about to jog up the road and try to catch up to them, but I stopped when I saw a piece of paper weighed down with a brick, sitting on top of a trash can next to the trailer door. I pulled the paper free and held it up. Written on it was a single sentence. The music keeps them away.
What's that supposed to mean?
As soon as I asked the question, the song that was playing ended. I assumed Elena would start a new song any moment, but she never did. The sudden silence, coupled with the idea that something might have happened to Elena, sent chills up my spine. I ran back towards the radio station.
Elena!
I'd only managed to make it a block before strange figures began appearing in the doorways of all the nearby shops.
Hello?
I stopped and raised my hand in greeting, thinking the closest figure was a person. I quickly realized my mistake when the figure stepped out of the shadows and onto the sidewalk. There was nothing human about it except its basic shape. Its face was featureless, and its body was a pixelated mixture of gray, black, and white. The colors in constant motion like the static on a television screen. As it got closer, I thought I could hear the hiss of white noise coming from it. The figures converged on me with slow, measured steps. I turned and ran back towards the trailer. But again, I didn't make it very far. While I was watching the figures in front of me, several more had come out of the buildings behind me. There were close to 20 of them, all making their way toward me. I was surrounded. I spun in a circle, looking for a way to escape, but none presented itself. There were now more than 50 of the figures, spread out around me in every direction, all walking toward me. The closest ones were less than 20 feet away. If you're gonna do something, you better do it now. The voice of reason shouted in my mind. I tensed my muscles, preparing to run. But before I did, the drum intro to Iron Maiden's Run to the Hills began pounding from the speakers. The bodies of the figures flickered, like a TV screen having trouble focusing, before they dispersed with flashes of light so bright that I had to shield my eyes. When I was able to uncover them, I saw that I was alone in the street. Not wanting to be stuck outside when the current song ended, I ran as fast as I could back to the radio station.
Elena!
I threw open the doors of the station and kept calling her name until I saw her standing in the doorway of the booth, staring at me with a concerned look on her face.
What's wrong?
He's gone, and there was these things, and they were looking at me, and he's gone. He's not even here. The trailer empty.
Catch your breath, and then start over.
He's gone.
What do you mean he's gone?
Gone as in gone.
I crossed the room so I didn't have to shout to be heard over the music.
He just up and left.
Why would he do that?
It probably has something to do with the weird...
I paused, trying to think of the right word to describe the figures I'd seen.
people out there.
I hooked my thumb over my shoulder towards the entrance of the radio station.
There are other people here?
I sighed in frustration.
Not people. People is the wrong word for them. They're
Things. Ghosts. Aliens. Fuck, I don't know what they are. I just know they aren't human. They appeared when you stopped playing the music. Why did you stop playing the music anyway?
I had to pee really bad. I didn't think I was going to be gone that long.
Then it suddenly hit her what I had said.
Did you say aliens?
She raised her eyebrows, looking at me like I was crazy. Instead of replying, I held out the note I'd found, still clutched in my fist. I found this. Elena took the note and smoothed it out so she could read it.
The music keeps them away. What's that supposed to mean?
It's better if you see for yourself. Go and stand in the entrance and keep your eye on the street.
What am I supposed to be looking for? Little green men?
She laughed as she walked toward the entrance. I wasn't amused by her attempted humor. You won't be laughing when you see them. Once Elena was in position, I walked into the booth and removed the needle from the record that was playing. A couple of minutes later, Elena came running back into the booth.
What the hell are those things?
I shrugged.
I have no idea. All I know is that the music keeps them away, like the note says.
Then hurry up and turn the music back on before they get in here!
I obliged, placing the needle back on the record, restarting the song. Elena peeked back through the doorway at the entrance to verify that the things outside were gone. She sighed in relief when she saw that they were.
We can't stay here.
I agree, but we can't just walk out of here. We won't make it out of town before the music ends.
Thinking about leaving made me recall the conversation we'd had with the man and how he was asking so many questions about the route we'd taken to get into town. He was asking those questions because he knew he'd be able to escape if he left the same way we had arrived.
How long did it take us to get into town from the water tower?
About 25, 30 minutes. Why?
Elena picked up the map the man had left on the desk and examined it.
If we cut across here...
She drew a straight line with her finger from the radio station to the water tower.
Running the entire way, we could probably make it back in about 10 minutes.
That means we'll need to start a song that's at least 10 minutes long to cover our escape.
Not a song. We need an entire album.
Well, I doubt you're gonna find one here. If there was one, that guy would have been playing it instead of sitting here playing song after song. Don't you think?
He wouldn't have been able to do that all day, though. He'd have to sleep sometime.
He had help. There was someone else living in that trailer with him. They probably took shifts playing songs while the other person slept.
That's what we can do! You can stay and play the music while I go and get help.
Why don't you stay and I get help?
I didn't want to be left alone in this creepy-ass town.
Because I'm faster than you. I can make it back to the car a lot quicker than you can.
You don't know that. I can run pretty fast when I want to.
Elena eyed my body, the look on her face implying that I was not in the best of shape.
I'm going.
She began walking quickly toward the exit.
You won't get very far.
I moved into the booth and removed the needle from the record.
Seriously? Don't you want to get out of here?
Of course I do, but I want us to do it together.
Elena stood with her hands on her hips and a scowl on her face.
Let's wait an hour. If we can't figure out a way for both of us to leave by then, you can go and get help while I stay here.
Fine. 1 hour.
Satisfied that we had settled our differences, I placed the needle back on the record.
I guess we should see what songs we have to work with.
After walking into the booth to join me, she started flipping through the available records.
I don't recognize any of these bands.
Look for anything by Megadeth, Metallica, or Slayer. Some of their songs are pretty long.
Okay, but first I need to pee.
The root beer I drank had gone straight to my bladder. I started to walk away, but stopped when I realized I had no idea where the restroom was. Guessing what I was about to ask her, Elena pointed the way.
It's on the other side, past the break room.
Thanks. I'll be right back. After I'd finished using the facilities and was washing my hands, I heard the music stop. A few seconds later, a new song started playing. Surprisingly, it was one that I recognized.
I know this song.
I declared as I walked back over to the booth. But there was no reply. The booth was empty, and Elena was nowhere to be found. She'd left without me, knowing I'd do the right thing and keep the music playing for her. Through the speakers, the lead singer for the band Europe belted out the chorus of their most popular hit, The Final Countdown.
In our first tale, we go for a walk. Going for regular walks can really help one's mood. Let's say you've recently experienced a major life change. Maybe you've let yourself get trapped in your own head. Going out and getting some fresh air can be one helpful step to break out of that cycle. But in this tale, shared with us by author Jeff Wood, we discover that taking a pleasant stroll can soon take a dark turn if you notice that you're casting two shadows. Performing this tale is Peter Lewis. But hey, maybe it's nothing. It only happens outside this one specific house, after all. Don't worry about the other you and ignore that glint in the window. Surely it's just a trick of the light.
You're a heart attack waiting to happen, my doctor told me. After my wife died, my health began to suffer. My doctor told me if I didn't start getting some exercise, I was going to have some kind of coronary event. He's right. I'm in my early 40s. I'm pretty overweight. So I tried jogging at first. I couldn't even make it a block. 5 or 6 houses down the street, and I was bent over, hands on my knees, wheezing. These pains shot through my lower legs like my muscles were tearing off my bones. Later, the doctor told me it was, shin splints. I started walking. The neighborhood I live in is an upper-middle-class subdivision in the suburbs of Denver. The streets are wide and well-maintained. Few cars are parked on the street, most of them tucked away in the 2-car garages and expansive driveways of their respective houses. Several schools are spread out through the area, all with nice green campuses, modern playgrounds, football fields, tennis courts. We have 2 firehouses and 5 churches. The neighborhoods are all patrolled by tasteful HOAs. 5:30 every weekday afternoon, like clockwork, I come home from work, change into jogging pants and a tee, slip on my running shoes, grab my phone and a bottle of water, and head out the front door. I expected to be alone in my walks. Most people would be inside their homes or inside their cars, I assumed. I was wrong. It turns out lots of people are walkers and joggers, and a lot of them at that hour of the day, right after work and school. I've been lonely since my wife died. The human interaction helps, even at a distance. My route varies. The streets are not laid out on a grid, but weave through the landscape in curves and circles, streets unexpectedly ending in cul-de-sacs and roundabouts. As a result, getting from one place to another rarely involves taking a straight path. Nearly every day I walk by the shadow house. I don't try to. The geometry of the streets must somehow lead me there. I approach it from the same direction every time I pass, west to east. Since I walk it around the same time every day, the sun is always behind me, casting long shadows in front of me whenever I pass the house. So why do I call it the shadow house? Well, because of the shadow that walks beside me whenever I pass. When I turn the corner to enter the block, my shadow swings around in front of me, keeping me company as I walk, lengthening as the sun lowers into the sunset. As I pass the property line of the house, the place where the well-tended lawn of the house next door morphs into the weed-choked soil of the shadow house. Another shadow joins my own. One moment, my own shadow is stretched out before me, the shadow of my head bobbing along with the rhythm of my walk. The next moment, two shadows loom in front of me. Two heads glide along the surface of the concrete in step to my gate. After I pass the property line on the far side of the house, the shadow disappears. The first few times this happened, I stopped immediately in front of the house and turned around to look behind me. No one was there. I saw no object that could have taken the space between the sun and the sidewalk. I assumed those first few times that it was the exercise. My body, unused to the exertion, was creating sights in my mind that did not exist in real life. I don't think that anymore. I came home wanting to tell my wife. She wasn't home, of course. She's been gone for nearly a year. It took me several moments to realize it. I started talking and then cut myself off, remembering. I keep forgetting she's not here anymore. Anyway, what is this shadow standing next to my own, showing itself only within the boundaries of this one house? Is the shadow there all the time and only shows itself when I pass this house? Or is the shadow specific to this house, this place? Is the shadow specific to me? I began to examine the house as I passed. Someone lived there. Mail sat in the mailbox, but not an unusually large amount. The lawn was unkempt, all weeds and cracked soil, but the weeds had been recently cut back. Drapes covered the windows. Lights could sometimes be seen in the rooms inside. No toys scattered on the lawn, no basketball hoops in the driveway. I've never seen anyone on the property, inside or outside. There may have been a car inside the garage, but never one parked outside. Something hung in the attic window. I couldn't tell what it was. Sunlight reflected off it. It could have been a prism or maybe a small pane of etched glass. It reminded me of these earrings my wife used to wear. Someone gave them to her for Christmas 2 years ago. A friend, she told me. She used to wear them often. Which friend? I'd ask her. She never told me. I think I know who gave them to her, but I never asked. I kept my hypothesis to myself. After the earrings, I began serving her a glass of wine every night before supper. She never said no. In fact, she greeted it. She seemed flattered by the gesture. She drank the entire glass of wine I provided her every night, until the end. I tried to avoid the house after I first noticed the shadow and realized it was something more than a trick of the light. I found that even when I tried to avoid the house, I couldn't. The house was always there, along my path. I was certain nothing supernatural was to blame. It was just one of those abstractions I thought about as I walked, how the street plan within a subdivision could funnel foot traffic so that it required to pass a particular spot in order to travel from point A to point B. It's like a math problem, a mapping and geometry problem, a problem whose solution could be found through careful application of science and logic. So no, I never actually thought the house found me or even sought me. The vagaries of mathematics, civil engineering, and random chance colluded to put this house on my path every day I walked. I accepted it as an unavoidable daily occurrence. The shadow bounced to the same rhythm as my footsteps. Every time I took a step, the shadow from my own body leaped forward. The other shadow leapt forward as well. We were like two friends whose gaits have synchronized. My wife and I used to walk together back in the good old days before the earrings. Back when I loved her and she loved me, and we lived together in our perfect little house. After we ate supper, after we put away the dishes, her washing, me drying, we'd walk the neighborhood together, hand in hand as the sun set. We even passed this house more than once. I remember her pace slowing as we neared it the first time. I remember her head turning to look in the windows as we passed. I asked her what she was looking for, but she didn't respond. It was as if she'd been there before. I accepted the shadow as part of the landscape of my daily walks, no different than the ceramic gnomes in the garden a few doors down from my house, the flags and political signs on the lawn across the street. I gave up trying to control my route and accepted that my path would always take me to the shadow house at some point during my walk. The shadow house rewarded me for my acceptance. Shadow House showed me my wife's earrings again, shining through the attic window every day as I took my walk. My wife was wearing them. My wife, who had been dead and buried for almost a year. I simply looked up at the attic window and saw her. The sunlight bouncing off the earrings caught my eye and drew it to the window. She stood there and watched me pass. She made it clear with the intensity of her gaze that she was focused on no one but me. I slowed, but did not stop. She held a glass of wine. She took a step closer to the window. She smiled thinly. Her head turned to track me as I passed. She watched as I walked past her for several weeks after that. Always her thin smile followed me as her earrings danced in the sunlight. Always she held the glass of wine I'd given her. Always the shadow walked beside me as I passed. Sometimes glare from the sunlight prevented me from seeing her, but most days she waited on me as I waited on the sight of her, wearing the earrings, holding the wine. I knew why she held the wine glass. I wondered why she wore the earrings. She was not buried with them. The funeral home had dressed her in the earrings when they prepared the body, but I insisted the earrings be taken off her ears. I took them, put them in my pocket. I was sure I'd thrown them away later that night. Clearly, I'd forgotten to. I didn't quit my walks after I spied my dead wife in the attic window. In fact, the sight made me more resolute to continue my exercises. One day, while passing the house, my eyes dropped from the empty window frame to the door below. The door was open. The door had never been open before. Twin shadows slung to my left as I turned and walked up the crooked path of stepping stones that led to the porch. I stepped up to the threshold of the door, shielded my eyes with the palm of my hand, and looked inside. The shadowed rooms beyond the doorway were sparsely filled with furniture. A couch hulking in the center of a room, a chair hiding in the corner. No paintings or posters adorned the walls, no carpet or rugs protected the hardwood floor. Candlelight flickered from distant rooms. I entered the house blinking with the change of light. A staircase to my right led to the next floor, and I instinctively took it. Chalk drawings, faded with time, tattooed the steps of the stairs. Crude drawings I could not decipher, scribbled characters that seemed like letters of a foreign alphabet. As I stepped off the stairway and onto the landing, the figures trailed off down a hallway and toward a smaller door tucked modestly into an alcove in the wall. I followed the figures, walking past cracked hallway walls to a door that opened onto a set of boxy, workmanlike stairs. I knew before I mounted them where they led. I walked up the steps to an unfinished attic. Rafters leapt from timber to timber overhead. Simple 2x4s framed the walls. A tumble of boxes sat hunched together in the dust of the corners. Sunlight spilled in from the window at the far end of the attic. My wife had watched me from that window. She was not there now. I walked towards the window. My feet stamped prints into the dust on the floor. I reached the glass and noticed my late wife's earrings sitting on the dusty sill. I recalled immediately the gentle manner in which she had set them down on her bedside table every night. I think she left them to keep me company. I hope so. I miss her. I looked out the glass of the window. My motionless body lay on the sidewalk below, blood soaking into the concrete beneath my head. 3 neighbors approached my body. One had a cell phone and was dialing 911. The other 2 discussed seeing me clutch my hands to my chest, falling forward so abruptly it looked as though I'd been pushed. It looked like a heart attack, they were telling each other. My doctor was right. I was a heart attack waiting to happen. The police came, an ambulance came, and then the coroner. I don't know where my wife went. She's not at the window. She's not in the house anymore. It's some sort of trick, you know. She must have cast some sort of spell, because I am in the house now. I live here. I've tried to leave. I can't. I watch the people as they pass, walking or jogging or biking or driving by, and I trace their paths with greedy eyes and a thin smile. I wonder where they go when they leave my eyesight. I'll look for you to walk past me. Look for me? A trick of the light from the attic window, a silhouette cast on the sidewalk. When you see me, you'll know I am the shadow that walks beside you.
In our final tale, we meet a man going through one of life's toughest challenges. His friend Neil has a new girlfriend, and it's severely reducing their number of boys' nights out. Thankfully, a traveling attraction has rolled up which all 3 of them can attend together. But in this tale, shared with us by author Jack Thackwell, this potential third wheel situation might just drive their friends to their doom. Performing this tale are David Alt, James Cleveland, Penny Scott Andrews, Andy Cresswell, and Erica Sanderson. So enjoy the sights, sounds, and smells. Let loose and have fun. But don't do anything that might leave you with regrets if you reflect on that one time when the fair came to town.
It was Friday when they started to set up the carnival. It was open the next night. That seems odd to me now. All those tents and rides, it should have taken them days, not hours. Nothing that big takes just hours to prepare. But at the time I thought, maybe they were just that good. We went that Saturday. Me, Neil, and his girlfriend Mel. It was a big thing for me. It was rare that I could get Neil out since he'd hooked up with Mel. They were a clingy, in-your-face pair ever since they'd met. The funfair, though, that had tempted him, even if I did have to do a bit of cajoling over the phone. Oh, come on, we always used to go to these things.
I don't know, mate. Me and Mel were just thinking about staying in with a curry, watching a film.
Like you did last Friday, you mean? Was it fair to use that against him? Maybe. Most likely not. You can tell me, oh, it's different when you have someone, and maybe it is, but you have to remember where you came from and who got you there. I'd heard him breathe out a heavy sigh that crackled down the line. I knew I'd got him. Oh, go on. You can win her a teddy at the air rifles and be a hero. That was the tipping point. There'd been one more moment of silence, and then...
All right, we'll meet you there.
When we arrived, it all seemed standard. Hooker duck stalls, ring toss pavilions, familiar old roller coasters smelling of sawdusted vomit. The way Neil kept all his attention on Mel, leaving me to walk behind them, made me face the sudden realization that this would probably be the last time we would meet up. It made me sad to think of that, but right there in the warm night breeze, surrounded by the glow of the rides, it felt bittersweet. One final go-around. The interesting thing about this fair were the less-than-standard attractions. Those really were amazing and out of place. The freak show in its red velvet tent, the fortune teller who beckoned us on with a crooked finger as she sat in her glass box that smelled of rot, the giant boa constrictor in its cage cordoned off by thick steel chains. This part of the fair was older, like something from a Victorian nightmare. One of the exhibits must have caught Neil's eye because he gasped and pried his hand away from Mel's grip before darting off, leaving me and her alone. I shot her a forced smile. She pursed her lips and looked away. Soon we saw Neil's waving arms. He was standing outside a large plywood shack. It was squat and rectangular with flaking black and red paint. It looked like it had been worn away over many years. It had 2 doors set into the wood, one marked in, one marked out. In stark golden letters above the doors were the words, Pickman's House of Horrors.
This looks great.
Does it?
Mel frowned.
I'm not getting that vibe. It smells like seawater.
Yeah, she's right. The good horror attractions always have some decoration on the outside, a severed head here, a clown mask there, and a rubber bat or two. I mean, this one's pretty plain. Neil just doubled down.
That's what makes this one so unique. They don't put anything on the outside because all the best bits are on the inside.
He grinned.
Seriously, look at the rest of the shit around here. This is pre-political correctness. Fuck knows what's in there, or how far they take it.
I was about to question his logic when a small man appeared from around the corner of the building. He was dressed in a red velvet jacket fraying at the cuffs and hem, and a straw boater. He seemed to carry with him the long-dead smell of fried food and faintly something metallic. When he grinned wide.
That is a fine observation, my good man. A very fine observation indeed.
Are you Mr. Pickman?
In the flesh.
The small man took a bow, nearly sending his boater tumbling to the ground.
And as your handsome friend there said, the very best of what is in store for you is kept within these walls. Evil I dare not name awaits you in Pickman's House of Horrors.
He had a face like a goblin out of a storybook. I wasn't sure if there was something wrong with him or he was just old, but I couldn't help but feel uneasy.
Well, I'm sold already.
Neil beamed. Mel frowned and tugged on his hand.
I thought we'd go to one of the stalls and see if you could win me a prize.
We will. Let's just do this first. After that, I'll play till I win you one of those big bears.
That seemed to pacify her. I was less easily convinced. Something didn't feel right about Mr. Pickman or his House of Horrors. It was like he was in the wrong place in some way, like he wasn't a carny, like he wasn't faking. All the other scares around there were modern, fluorescent masks and day-glow plastic. Not him. How much is it? I thought the cost might put Neil off.
For the price of but £1, you will gain entry to this marvellous attraction, a remnant of a bygone era when carnivals were the pride of this great land of ours.
It sounded like he'd rehearsed this in a mirror and long since lost enthusiasm for what he was saying. Neil was already fishing around in his pocket for a £1 coin. He looked pointedly at Mel and she rolled her eyes before doing the same. I groaned and pulled a £5 note from my pocket. Can you make change for this?
Certainly, sir.
Pickman's eyes grew wide as he saw the note. He smiled before clicking out £4 coins from a coin dispenser on his belt. We waited expectantly as Mr. Pickman unlocked the door marked "In," revealing nothing but darkness.
Off you go.
That was the last thing Mel and Neil heard from him. I was bringing up the rear and caught some quieter words.
Just watch your fucking step.
It was a flash of truth behind the mask. Pickman the not-so-jolly. Pickman was happy to have got our money so he could go and buy himself a drink, that sort of thing. Oddly, it reassured me. He was just a huckster after all, nothing more sinister than that. We stepped inside and he shut the door, entombing us in darkness. A second later, dim electric bulbs flickered into life, and we were in a narrow corridor plastered with old-fashioned floral wallpaper, a sickly shade of arsenic green.
Well, this isn't very scary.
We'll give it a chance, Mel. We've only just got in.
Neil slipped his hand into hers. I saw Mel's fingers squeeze around his and assumed the atmosphere was getting to her more than she was letting on. We started to walk. The lights, yellowed with dust and the gunk accrued through years of being in one place, did little to brighten the corridor, and we could see no more than 3 feet in front of us. I began to feel a little claustrophobic. I imagined the ugly floral wallpaper pressing in on me as I walked, the plywood walls grinding and splintering against each other as they moved. At the end of the passage was a flight of spiral stairs. We stopped just before them and stared down into the stairwell. This thing goes down? How could it possibly go down?
Wasn't there an army base here in the war? Maybe this is an old bomb shelter.
It's got to be.
Mel didn't know any more about it than I did, but it's good to agree with your boyfriend, and she clung on tighter to him. No, it didn't make sense. This was a pop-up attraction meant to be taken down, moved on to a new area and put back up. Maybe they got lucky with an old base this time, but that couldn't happen everywhere. Did they dig out new foundations each time? How could they? Neil grinned.
See? I knew this would be interesting.
So, who's going to go first?
The 3 of us had a short moment of silence where we each expected one of the others to volunteer.
Fine, I'll do it.
Neil began to descend the staircase, placing his hands against the wall to balance himself. I distinctly heard him mutter something mean-spirited under his breath. We followed him down, and the 3 of us came to another door. It looked like the way into a study. It was heavy and made of dark wood. Mel pushed it open, and we stepped into the room that lay beyond. It was very odd. All the surfaces were covered in dark black foam, and it was cut in half by a crisscross design of what looked like wire. On the far wall opposite us was a clock face, and underneath that, a second door. Well, that looks like where we need to get to. Neil walked across to the wire and made to pluck it, like you would a guitar string. It moved down a centimeter or two before twanging back into place and slicing off the tip of his finger.
Shit!
Blood welled up and dripped down between his knuckles.
It's like bloody razor wire.
There was a chime from somewhere I couldn't see, and the door behind us slammed shut and locked. I could see the clock on the wall in front of us, and I watched the minute hand begin to move. The wires across the room whirred, and a diamond-shaped gap appeared in the middle. It was big enough for a person to fit through, but only just, and even that was shrinking. I then understood where I'd seen the foam before and why the wires were moving closer together. It was soundproofing, like the kind used in recording studios. It was there to stop our movements making a sound, but some mechanism in the room was picking up on our voices, and it was our words that were making the gap small.
What the hell is happening?
The wires started to vibrate, and the gap shrunk by an inch. The big hand on the clock kept moving. I put my finger to my lips to try and shush the other two, but they didn't seem to understand.
This isn't right.
Mel was starting to jitter. The wires closed in again. In despair, I dropped my finger from my lips. Will you shut up? She looked at me in surprise, and I gestured to the wires as they moved even closer together. The gap was now the size of an open window. I checked the clock. 6. I didn't want to know what would happen when it reached 12. I approached the wires. They seemed to sparkle in the dim light of the room. I guessed they'd been coated in something to make them extra sharp, ground glass perhaps. I could see that they weren't so much vibrating as soaring backwards and forwards, making little slicing noises as they did. I tentatively lifted my right leg and passed it through the gap. I waited for the sharp sting of wires cutting through my jeans, but it never came, only the firmness of foam under my shoe on the other side. This made me confident. I stooped down and ducked my head under the gap. I was safe. I checked the clock. 8. Only 4 ticks left to get Neil and Mel across before... Before what? I waved to the other two, and they hurried over to the gap. Mel was the first to try and cross. She stuck her head through and offered me her arms while Neil lifted her legs and shoved her through the remaining space. Her feet hit the foam with a soft thud before she picked herself up. Neil's turn. His finger was still bleeding, and he sucked on it as he eyed up the space in the wire. My eyes caught the clock again. 9. When I looked back to my friend, I saw that he was preparing to try and launch himself through the hole. I moved my hands up to my chest and waved to show him that I thought that was a very bad idea. Of course, he didn't listen to me. He never fucking listened to me. And jumped anyway. He launched himself through the air, and to his credit, his torso did clear the gap. For a moment, it seemed like the gamble would pay off. That is, until the toe of his Converse got caught on the wire. There was a gristly sawing sound, and Neil came unstuck. He dropped to the foam and was followed a moment later by the last part of his foot. Neil's hand sprung to the clean cut of flesh that used to be the end of his foot. Blood pulsed out from under his fingers and soaked into the floor. I pulled off my jumper and ripped a sleeve from it. I tied that tightly around his foot, trying to stem the flow of blood. The clock struck 12 and the room boomed with the sound of chimes. As the sound was hungrily absorbed by the foam coverings, the wires shot across the other side of the room. Anyone who had been standing on the wrong side would have been minced finer than Wagyu beef. It didn't just go to where we'd been standing, it sort of danced around in it, making sure it got every inch. Pieces. We would have been sliced to pieces. Then the trap stopped soaring and came back to its original grid pattern, which you could now see had been made of 2 different layers. The silence was deafening. I reached out and gingerly touched the wire. Nothing happened, no gap formed again. Well, we're not getting out that way.
What the hell just happened?
Neil grimaced. He was still clutching his foot, but the blood seemed to have stopped for the moment. Mel wiped sweat from her face.
Holy shit! That thing could have killed us!
Fuck that. It nearly did kill me. We've got to get out of here.
He tugged his phone from his back pocket.
I'm calling the police.
Mel did the same while I started to look around the room.
Shit, no service.
It became obvious that it wasn't just his network, but that we were trapped in some kind of dead space. Neither phone worked, no matter how hard they jabbed the buttons or how loudly they yelled abuse.
We've got to yell. Maybe someone will hear us.
It won't work. See that phone?
Yeah?
It's soundproofing, like in a recording studio. No one will be able to hear us, no matter how loud you scream.
What the fuck is going on?
Mel was starting to get panicky. I couldn't blame her, but I spoke as calmly as I could. If Pickman put one of these traps into his house of horrors, I'm sure it won't be the only one. He's like that crazy guy, H.H. Holmes, and his murder castle.
Who?
Mel looked blank. I turned to Neil. He was glassy-eyed with pain, but he might remember the conversation we'd once had in the library about famous and fucked-up murders. You know, the guy at the Chicago's World Fair? America's first serial killer? He used a bunch of contractors to build a block-sized hotel full of traps and chutes. Neil shook his head.
The fuck is wrong with you? The shit you bring up.
Mel pulled us back to the situation at hand.
Couldn't this be the only one? The only trap? Maybe Mr. Pickman thought this one would kill us. Are you sure there'll be more?
Not a chance. If Pickman's anything like Holmes, he'd have had gas in here as well. A failsafe, something to make sure we didn't make it.
So, this is all some kind of sick game?
No, well, sort of. This is something important to Pickman. He needs this, but it has to be a certain way. He'll have specific rules. We just have to learn them and follow them. Neil was hobbling to his feet.
There's only one way out of this place. Assuming we can get out to all there is. And that means we have to keep going.
Mel helped Neil to stay upright and pulled his arms around her shoulder for support. He wasn't going to be much good at walking now, and there was a worrying paintbrush trail of blood behind us. Seemed my sleeve hadn't been as useful as I thought. I cautiously pushed the door open and waited. Nothing. I poked my head around the frame. Another corridor. The same as before, the same yellowing electric lights and ancient wallpaper, but this time it was shorter, and I could see all the way to the end where there was an old-fashioned elevator, the kind with the metal cage door and brass handles. I waved the other two on and shut the door behind us. Watch where you step. We don't want any more nasty surprises. We hobbled towards the elevator, staring at our feet, trying to spot any traps, but in the end we made it. No deadfalls, no punji sticks, no falling candelabras. We heaved Neil into the lift and leant him against the wall while we examined the buttons. At first, they gave me hope. Maybe I had been wrong when I said these wouldn't take us up to the outdoor. But then I took a second glance at the buttons. There were 2 floors, -1 and -2. The only way out was down. Mel looked at me. She knew. I shrugged by way of apology before pressing the dark button. The elevator jarred into life, and the door shut. It was, from a time before, Muzak, so we were left with the grinding of gears as we descended further into the earth. I leant back against the door and rubbed my face with my hands. Soon the lift shuddered and the sound of gears stopped. The door creaked open and we stepped through. Once again, we found ourselves in a corridor, but this time there was no illumination. We pulled Neil upright and began to haul him through the darkness, the only light being cast by a dingy bulb in the elevator, throwing slender mockeries of our shadows ahead of us along the walls. We hadn't taken more than 5 paces before the door to the elevator slid shut and descended, leaving us in total darkness.
What do we do now?
There's only one thing we can do. Keep going and hope there's a door at the end of this hallway. We started walking again, dragging Neil under his arms. I had the feeling that he wanted to say something, but before he could, there was a noise from beside us, a loud slamming. It made all 3 of us jump, and we nearly dropped Neil. I heard a slight sniffing noise, the kind a dog makes as it scents the air. Neil trembled over my shoulder.
What was that?
Just run! I began to power my feet into the floor, practically pulling the other 2 over in the process. That was when the noise started, a clacking like clawed feet on a hardwood floor. It was right behind as we ran. My heart nearly stopped when a harsh, panting voice joined it. I turned my head for an instant, still running, trying to catch a glimpse of the thing despite the dark. But I couldn't see anything apart from 2 flashes of red. The creature's eyes, which were full of joyous light as it chased us through the passageway. The thing babbled other words at us as we ran, but I couldn't hear them for the drumming in my ears. At last, we crashed into something solid and unforgiving, knocking us over. I heard a cry from Neil as he landed badly on his leg. We waited in the darkness, panting for the thing to begin its work, but it never did. Puzzled, I got up, pulling the other 2 with me. I faced the corridor, keeping an eye on those 2 bits of red light, and walked backward, slowly, my arm around Neil's waist. We moved until we found ourselves pressed against the solid surface we had run into. I wandered my free hand over its exterior. I could feel a grain and knew whatever it was made of wood. A few more moments of searching and my hand found something metal and round. A doorknob. I gripped it hard and turned. The door opened easily on greased hinges when pushed by our weight, flooding the hallway with light. As the beam of light widened, it lit everything in the corridor. The blank wooden walls, the scratched and stained floor. Even the creature standing no less than a foot from us. It was very small, its full height making it no taller than my waist. Its skin was grey and dead-looking. It had a matted beard of dark black hair and yellowed eyes. Its hands were gnarled and looked as powerful as pneumatic vices. Its fingers ended in long claw-like nails. The creature stared at us, standing in the doorway. It didn't move at first, it simply looked. It opened its mouth in a grin, giving us a good look at a set of yellow, gristle-flecked teeth, each as sharp as a surgical knife. The thing flicked out a long red tongue and slid it over these canines. That gesture said all it needed to. I'll be seeing you later. It darted to our right, disappearing through a wooden hatch. We heard it skittering away through the wall. Mel jumped when she heard that, and Neil almost fell.
What the fuck kind of thing was that?
I stabilized my friend, and he glared at Mel. I don't know, and there's nothing we can do about it now. Come on, let's just get the fuck out of here. The three of us turned around and headed into the new room. It was different from the last one. This one was circular with yellow painted walls. There was a heavy screen of dust in the air, and the current of the closing door sent it dancing through the beam of bright yellow bulbs fixed to the ceiling. There was an exit on the opposite side. I didn't need to try the handle to know that it was locked. I propped Neil in a sitting position against the wall and told Mel to look after him while I looked around the room.
What are we going to do?
You are going to stay calm, keep your heartbeat down. You lost a lot of blood in that corridor. Lose any more and you'll end up looking like that shriveled old husk Pikmin. I wagged a finger at him, trying to keep jovial. Mel nodded.
He's right. If you lose any more, you're going to start blacking out.
Neil began to grumble, but I'd already turned my attention back to the room. There had to be some way to open the door. My heart skipped a beat when I caught sight of a large pull grip dangling from the wall. It was one of the old ones, like you see in lavatories, with the long wooden bars inside a metal U which was attached to a chain that vanished into the yellow plasterwork of the wall. Guys, I found something. They looked up and noticed the chain. Their eyes lit up with hope.
What are you waiting for?
Yeah, pull it.
I reached out to pull the chain before taking my hand back. I remembered what had happened in the last room. We'd gotten lucky. The trap had been relatively easy and we'd gotten through more or less unharmed. What if we weren't so lucky this time? Are you sure, guys? We don't know what'll happen. There might be another trap.
We made it through the one before in one piece, didn't we?
Mel hastily backtracked after a scowl from Neil.
I mean, we made it out alive.
Like it or not, if this could open the door, it was our only option. I sighed and gave the chain a sharp tug. It rattled and its links chanked as they slid from the wall before retracting and returning to its previous position. There was a sudden crunching, and the walls of one half of the room slid down, revealing a giant steel bracket, all lined with sharp metal hooks. We heard the scratch of a needle on a record, and the bright lights began to flash on and off. Chopin's Nocturne No. 2 flared into life, and there was a long series of audible clicks from the hooks, each as thin as a pencil but as long as a knitting needle. I stood stock still, trying not to laugh at the madness of the thing, feeling the music swell and rise, waiting for something to happen. Mel stared past me towards the chain. Maybe she was going to pull it once more to be certain it worked or something. I had no idea. But before she could get halfway, one of the many hooks shot through the air and buried itself in her shoulder. Blood impacted away from the wound and splattered the wall behind her, the yellow paint now speckled with red. Mel screamed and dropped to her knees. The hook was attached to a snaking iron chain that disappeared into a cavity past the iron grid of the bracket. This chain began to slowly but purposefully retract. Her screams clashed with Chopin as she flailed at the hook with her arm. This only succeeded in sending another prong from the bracket into her forearm. This chain also promptly tightened itself. I heard a metallic clicking noise as, link by link, the tethers began to drag Mel towards the edge of the room. I saw Neil try to get to his feet and shoved him back down, wham, onto his ass.
No, because she's moving. Stay right where you are. But we have to help her.
I knew he was right, but what could we do?
Mel, you have to pull them out.
Are you kidding me?
You've got to. Stop moving and pull them out. It's the only way.
My throat was starting to hurt then. If I wasn't careful, I was going to tear my vocal cords. Her remaining arm moved to the hook in her shoulder. She wrapped her hand around it and gave a slight tug. She screamed and let it go. Tears dripped down her face.
I can't do that! It hurts too much!
You've got to do something.
I could see tears forming themselves in Neil's eyes as well. It must have been hell for him, seeing the girl he loved in that much pain and not being able to do anything about it.
If I move, then those chains will come for me too. There is nothing we can do.
Mel remained screaming and sliding across the floor. Chopin remained bright and cheerful as Neil's girlfriend struggled with the hooks. Whatever mechanism was pulling on the chains was moving faster now. Mel was being dragged with increasing speed towards the row of hooks. Her legs scrabbled on the floor, trying to find more grip, trying to stop the grim progress of the chains, but this only sent 2 more into her thighs, causing her to move all the faster. Soon her feet slipped in a track of blood, and she lost her hold altogether and went skidding across the ground. We watched in horror as, again, the chains sped up, and Mel was pulled upright against the bracket. Neil buried his head in his hands. He didn't want to see what came next. I wanted to turn away too. I knew whatever was going to happen to Mel was not going to be pretty, but I couldn't. My eyes were glued to the scene in front of me. The horror of it wouldn't let me go. Mel had been annoying, but no one deserved to die like that. The spikes burst through her stomach and chest and out of her back in a shower of blood, before quickly retracting and pulling her hard against the metal frame. She screamed, and for what felt like an eternity, the sound of splintering bones not quite drowned out by the music as Mel was hulked by the immense force exerted by the chains. And then as the chunks of her ruined body were pulled through the gaps in the bracket, blood sluiced down the metal and the yellow wall slid back up. It crunched into place, the record screeched off, and we were left in horrified silence. If it hadn't been for the bloodstains smeared all over the floor, you would never know anything had happened. Blood trails, finger paintings where you could see her handprints and desperate smeared toe streaks.
What happened?
Neil was still covering his eyes.
Where is she? Where's Mel? You really don't want to know.
I shuddered My sentence was followed by a metal slamming noise. I looked over to see the door swing open.
Come on, let's get out of here.
I heaved Neil up by his armpits. I gripped him around the waist and pulled his arm around my shoulder. We approached the doorway, beyond which was, as I had expected, another dimly lit hallway. Like the one after the wire room, this was short enough to see the end of the corridor. This time it wasn't an elevator or a stairwell. This time it was simply a hole in the far wall. We hobbled through the door and began to move. I scanned the walls at about shin level, hoping against hope that I wouldn't find a small wooden hatch, praying for the first time in my life that we wouldn't hear running feet from behind us. Of course we didn't. I reminded myself that the first time we had seen the creature, we had been in the corridor just before the room of hooks. The hallway we were in now would only be the interlude before the next challenge. I dragged Neil to the end of the corridor into the hole. I could now see that someone had painted a large red heart around the gap. Not one of those little love hearts you see on Valentine's Day, one of the proper ones, the anatomically correct ones. It gleamed in the light cast by the lamps, dark red streaks of oil paint roughly slapped into the woodwork. I stared at the heart for a while, examining all the veins and ventricles before Neil coughed.
What the fuck are you waiting for? Let's get out of this fucking place.
I took a closer look at the hole. It was pitch black and I couldn't make out any shapes or noises. I leant Neil against the wall and gingerly put my hand into the empty space, just waiting for something to bite down on my hand and drag me in. There was nothing in there. All I could feel was smooth, round wall that went on for about a foot before the floor sloped away.
I think it's a slide.
I laughed. A slide seemed oddly childish for a house of horrors.
There's gotta be a way out. We're still going down. Further into the fucking thing. For all we know, there's a fucking bear trap down there that's covered in glass and piss.
I drew back my hand and smacked Neil full force across the mouth. His skin was wet and hot with sweat and tears.
Listen, you stupid bastard. There is no other way to go. We have to follow his fucking trail, so it's either this slide and whatever's at the bottom, or we just give up and wait here to starve.
A trail of blood dripped from a split in his lip.
I just heard my girlfriend get torn apart. What the fuck do I care about getting out of here?
You might not want to live, but...
I dug my fingers into his shoulders and started to heave.
But I do!
I pulled Neil forward and helped him into the mouth of the chute. I watched him recede into the darkness, then drop away from my sight. I heard a slight whoosh and a short cry of surprise, then silence. I clambered into the hole and crawled on my hands and knees for a matter of seconds before the floor fell from under me and I was tumbling into nothing. I came to a sudden stop with such velocity that the wind was knocked from my lungs. I'd landed on something soft. I pushed my hand down to it and found that it was a layer of cushions, all made from different materials and designs. I felt patches of crust in some places of the covers, marks left by previous victims. I reached my hand out in front of me to feel for anything that I might stumble on, and it came down on what felt like denim. I heard a small cry, and the denim thing jerked away, causing a bigger cry. I guessed that the denim thing was Neil. Bright lights snapped on and illuminated the hallway we were in. It was long, longer than the one before the room of hooks, but I could see all the way to the end of this one thanks to the lights. They were cold and bright, either new or more like stage lights. That light showed me something else, something I should have been expecting but still made my heart drop. Neil? I think we're going to have to run.
What? Why?
I stretched out one finger and pointed to the shin-high wooden hatch in the wall. Wordlessly, Neil nodded and I tugged into his feet, my back now aching from all the lifting I'd been doing.
You ready? Because we are seriously going to have to leg it.
Neil grimaced.
Yeah, let's get this over with.
I got ready, stretched my muscles, limbering up like an Olympian preparing to go for gold, and started running. I propelled myself along the corridor, dragging Neil after me. My trainers slammed into the floor and my heart pounded against my ribs. I could taste hot saliva in my mouth and my tongue felt swollen and bloated. When I heard a hatch opening, I nearly dropped Neil. The hound was loose. I heard those long nails on the floor behind us and I willed myself to move faster. My legs were burning now and I was muttering prayers to God, any God that could hear me deep under the earth and afraid. It was no use. I could hear the triumphant whoops from the thing behind us as it closed the distance. We were simply not fast enough. No matter how many breaths I took or how hard I powered my feet down, we weren't going to make it. Then a thought struck me. A bad one. I was out of options. The dark recesses of my mind chortled with glee and clapped their hands together, applauding me for my sickness as I hungrily seized the idea, my lifeline out of that place of nightmares. I gripped Neil tighter and unhooked his arm from around my shoulder. I shoved him away from me. He screamed with surprise and shock as he fell to the ground. I rushed on as his screams filled the stale air. The creature was on him. As I ran through the hall, that awful calcified gnawing sound of teeth on bone echoed off the walls and followed me. I crashed gratefully into the door and fumbled for the handle. I'd done it. I'd made it out. But maybe the least intact. I clutched the handle and turned to face down the corridor. I could see that thing crouched over Neil, blood glinting in the light as it pulled around my friend. The creature paused and looked up at me. For a horrible moment, I thought it would charge, but it simply grinned its terrible, snaggle-toothed grin and pointed at me. I thought it was marking me for its next meal, that it was going to spring on me. Instead, it took Neil by the shoulders and pulled his still twitching form backwards into the shadows. I greedily gulped down air. My legs ached. I just wanted this to be all over. I resigned myself to my fate, knowing that whatever was behind this door would end it. I turned the handle, shoved it open, and stumbled through. I felt a cool night breeze on my face. I opened my eyes and saw the fairground. I wheeled around and saw the wooden facade of Mr. Pickman's House of Horror, the plywood outdoor just shutting behind me. I fell to my knees, trampled grass soft beneath me. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes.
Cheer up, son!
Mr. Pickman strode into view. He seemed genuinely pleased to see me. I just lay there.
Nice going. I've been moving my little attraction up and down the country for a long time now, and let me tell you, you did very well. Very well.
He loomed closer for a second, exuding mock sympathy from that crumpled face. Just how old was this guy?
Yes, very well indeed. And in the end, well, it was him or you, wasn't it?
He bent down and slid something onto my lapel. It was a bright red badge. I grabbed at my jacket and pulled it to look at the button. I survived Mr. Pickman's House of Horror, it read in dark, spidery lettering. He tapped it, his nail making a ticking noise.
These things are rare, you know. Only a handful of people in all the worlds have one. So you got it well.
He finished up with a wink, straightening his back with a series of dry pops.
Why don't you come back next year, champ? Try your luck again.
His face broke in a smile that pulled at his lips like they'd been dragged up by fishhooks.
Maybe you won't lose so many friends the second time around, huh?
Pickman turned his back to me and disappeared through a side door into his shack. I heard him chuckle as he started off into his labyrinth, and under that, was it the grinding of walls? The pathways and corridors reshaping themselves, reconstructing the place? Or just my imagination mixed with vibrations from the other rides? To this day, I haven't set foot in another carnival. I can't stand the smells of them. The oil on the machines, the popcorn and candy floss. If I see the lights or hear the calliope music playing late at night, I walk in the other direction. I don't know what I would do if I saw that old straw boater coming towards me through the crowd.
As the fires wane and embers glow, our stories cease as shadows grow. The night is long and darkness deep. Remain with us. Embrace no sleep. The No Sleep podcast is presented by Creative Reason Media. The musical score was composed by Brandon Boone. Our production team is Phil Michalski, Jeff Clement, and Jesse Cornett. Our creative content manager is Olivia White. Our editor-in-chief is Jessica McAvoy. I'm your host and executive producer, David Cummings. Please visit the NoSleepPodcast.com for show notes and more details about the people who bring you this show. On behalf of everyone at the No Sleep Podcast, we thank you for listening and for being a supportive Season Pass member who is under our spell. This audio production is copyright 2021 and 2022 by Creative Reason Media, Inc., all rights reserved. The copyrights for each story are held by the respective authors. No duplication or reproduction of this audio program is permitted without the written consent of Creative Reason Media, Inc.